Hello YouTubers, welcome to part 2 of this series, and here is what this video will cover and what you'll have built by the end of this video. So it's a complete animation tree setup for our player and some basic scene setups for our controller. So now let's see the table of contents for this video. So the first point is setting up player scene and its structure. Then we will start by creating an animation tree graph for our controller, and we'll also understand the node flows within the graph, how it actually works. So talking about the prerequisites, you need to have some familiarities with Godot's UI, and the requirement is low. So the next prerequisite is understanding the scene hierarchy. So in Godot, how the scene structure are done, and it's moderate. Well, the last one is high important prerequisite, and that's my earlier video on animation tree nodes, where I have explained all the nodes and working of those nodes, so you have some better understanding of how to set up. Now for the previous recap, in the last video we downloaded, rigged and applied root motion to our archer and bow inside Blender, baked our animations and created a simple arrow. If you didn't watch the video, then please do it before going further. Let's open up Godot and start creating a new project. So let's click on this create option, and the name will be Archer series. You can name it whatever you wish, and let's click on create. Now once your project has been created, we need to import all the models that we exported from Blender in our last video. So let's open up the file manager in the file system, and here let's create a new folder by pressing Ctrl+Shift+N, and let's name it as models. Let's open it up. Let's create one more folder. Let us name it as Archer, and we will be pasting our Archer model inside this. So let's open up the folder where we exported our Archer model, and this is the folder, the Archer. So here I exported all the models, and if you don't see any of the models listed, if you just see as FBX and all those FBX, then you can just click on this sort option, then click on date modified. So once you click on that, you will see the exported bow, arrow and as well as the Archer model. So let's select the Archer, let's copy, let's go back to this Archer folder and let's paste it here. We'll do the same thing for our bow. So let's create new folder, call it as bow, and let's copy this bow.glb. Let's paste it here. Let's create a new folder, call it as arrow. Let's copy the arrow.glb and let's paste it here. Great. So once you have completed pasting, let's go back to our Godot, and Godot will automatically detect those files and start importing them. So this process may take some time because the models have a lot of animations, and once Godot has imported, you'll see some warnings, just ignore them. And let's see what we have in our Archer. Alright, we have the Archer with all these animations, and let's see our arrow. Yes, we have our arrow. Let's see the bow, and it also has the animations. Great. So now let's start creating a new scene. So the scene will be character body 3D, and this will have this armature. So just drag and drop this armature below the character body 3D, and now we need to adjust a few settings. And by the way, if you want to have this first person controller, like if you press W it goes forward, if you press S the view goes backward, AS it goes AD it goes left and right, and using mouse wheel you can just increase or decrease the sensitivity, and you can just do this by pressing Shift F, so it goes in the first person view. And great. Now I think the cloths are too shiny, so let's first deal with those. So if you select the Archer anim, right click it and click as editable children, you will see that it contains all the nodes that actually had in this exported file. Great. Let's click on this body. So this is the main that controls the roughness value or metallic, kind of metallic. So let's click on this, then click on the icon. Let's make it as unique, and let's open up this section by pressing this mesh, and let's go to surface. Let's again make this as unique. Let's again click on the material, and here in the roughness, let's try changing some values. Even in metallic, great. So you can just adjust it to your liking, and also it depends on like the sun values. So we'll do the same thing for uh, this eyelashes, even though it's not, even this node is not eyelashes, but by clicking this icon the hands are getting invisible. So let's do the same thing for our hands too, and let's go to resources, make them as unique, and let's go to roughness, just increase the roughness a bit, metallic little bit. Great. And I think we can also increase the brightness of this body. So let's try to change the metallic value of our body, and great, this looks great. Now if you select the character body, it has some warnings, and this says that you need to have a collision shape. So let's quickly add a collision shape 3D, and let's go to this side view. So if you want to go to right view, front view, top view, you can just press numpad 1379, same as Blender shortcuts, and let's change the shape. So let's make a cylinder shape, or you can try as capsule shape, and let's place the shape that roughly matches our body. And you need to also change from the front view, and great. Now let's rename our model. Let's say it as Archer. Now let's start adding animation tree so that we can control how our player behaves in the animations. So now let's start adding a node 3D. This is just for organization, and yes, the better you organize, the more controls you'll have. So let's rename this node as animation misc, and now let's add a animation tree. So in the animation tree, select the animation player and assign it as the animation player of our archer. Click on OK, and we need to add the tree root. So let's select this option, and let's select new animation state machine, and then let's also make our character visually like how it actually moves on the ground. So for that, let's add this root motion option. Click on assign, and you need to select the Mixamo rig root. So like you can just list out all the bones of your model by pressing this icons, but we just need to target our root bone. So then click on OK. So this will target our root bone. Let's also add some visual nodes that will help us to visualize how our player is moving on the ground. So let's select the animation misc. Let's add root motion view, and in the animation path, let's assign the animation tree. Click on OK. Now we need to actually create some animation state machines for our player. So let's click on animation tree, and make sure you select this node as animation state machine. Then in the bottom section, you'll see that we will have an option of animation tree. So click open it, and yes, here we will be designing all our animation behavior. Now let's start. Click on this connect nodes icon and just drag and drop from the start. Let's add a blend tree, and we'll do the same thing. We will add another blend tree, and this both will be, the inactive and active states. So let's quickly rename them as inactive and active. Great. Now you'll see that during this transition there is a green mark on this inactive to active state, and just select this transition in the switch, change it, let it be immediate, but in the advanced section change or reset this mode to be enabled. Now let's click open and start editing our inactive blend tree. So let's click on this pencil icon, and this will open another, a workspace. So that's basically inside this inactive. And by the way, if you want to have the complete overview of all these nodes that I'll be using, you can just go check out my video that clearly explains how to use all these nodes. Great. Let's start editing our inactive blend tree. And let's first add a blend space 1D, and let's quickly connect this output to this output section. Let's rename this blend space 1D to movement. Make sure all these are in small letter, and let's click on open editor, and here we'll be editing our idle to walk cycle. Great. Let's select this icon. Let's click on this option, somewhere over here, right click, add animation, and you can add any of the animations that you wish. And in our case, the idle animation, let's click on that. At the center we will add one more blend tree, and at the right side we'll again add this second blend tree. So now what exactly this means, like basically in the movement, this point will be the idle state, and as we go from here to here, so the player will start from idle to transition to walk, and from here to here the transition will be from walk to run. So this is how the blend space 1D actually works. So now you basically can see that the player is not doing anything, and to fix that, let's go to root, let's click on this option, and it says that nothing is connected to the output, and that's because we need to actually connect some outputs to this section. So let's click on the icon, let's click on the dot, click on open editor, and here let's add a animation, and the animation will be, let's say, walking. Connect it to time scale and just connect it to the output, and as soon as you connect, you can see that our player starts to walk. We'll do the same thing for the right position dot. So let's select the right dot, click on open editor, and we'll add an animation. The animation is gonna be slow run. Let's connect it to time scale, and let's connect it to output. Great. Now let's go back to movement, and let's start. You can see that the player actually played the animation once, and after playing it, it just stopped the animation. So now to fix this looping issues, you can just open up your Archer model, and before actually doing anything, if we click on the re-import after doing some changes, our scene may get crash. So let's save our scene before that. Press Ctrl S to save the scene. Let's create a new folder, call it as maybe player, and the file name, let it be as player controller. Let's save it. Great. Now let's click on this exported file, that's basically GLB file, and let's start changing something over here. So the first thing that we need to change is let's say unarmed idle. So select the animation, in the loop mode change it to linear. We'll do the same thing for slow run, linear. Also the same thing for walking, let's change it to linear. Then click on re-import. Great, our scene didn't crash, but it's a better practice to save the scene, and sometimes yes, it may get crash. Alright, let's select the animation tree. In the animation section now you can see that our player starts to play the animation in the loop. And now if we transition from this point to this point, you can see that the player, actually moves from walk to standing idle. And if you go on the right side, you can see that the player, starts from a simple walk to run. But here you can see that when we transition from walk to slow run, I mean when you transition from run to slow walk, you'll see that at some point the legs, doesn't blend properly. So to fix this issue, that's why we just created, this one more blend tree with added a time scale. So we'll be solving this issue using GD script later. That's why we just added this blend tree at slow walk as well as this run. So now let's go back to this root and let's transition to active. And inside active we don't have anything connected to the output node, so that's why we get a warning. So let's quickly fix that. Let's add a blend space 2D. So previously we just added 1D because we just wanted to transition from idle to walk, then walk to run, but here we'll be having two-dimensional movement, so we need to add a blend space 2D. And if you don't get what I'm doing, just make sure you watch my previous video so that you'll have some better understanding. Great. Now let's rename to movement and let's open an editor. Here also we need to add few points, but here this time we'll just add direct animations instead of any blend tree or other state machines. Great. Now let's select standing aim idle, and yes, this one. And for the forward movement, let's add standing aim walk forward. For the right, let's add standing aim walk right. For the backward, let's add standing aim walk backward. For the left, let's add standing aim walk left. Great. Let's see if it's actually working, and you can see it's working, but again the animations are just playing once. We need to set our animations to be looping on these animations tool. So let's open up our GLB model. Let's select standing aim idle, set it to linear. Then let's go down where we have this standing aim walk forward. Let's do it as linear. Even the walk backward, let's make it as linear. Even the left and right. And you can say that, hey, if you're doing all these loop mode as linear, then why don't we make all the animations to be looping? And actually we don't need few of the animations to be looping, such as picking up the bow, or some animations that let's say drawing the arrow or releasing the arrow, or even from fall to ground. So like we have some animations that we no need of looping. So as we get the requirements, we can just easily set them as loop mode, and then we can just re-import them. Great. You can see that the player actually switches the pose suddenly, and yes, if you don't save your scene, then as I said, it may crash. Great. Now let's see. You can see that our player starts to walk forward. This is idle, this is backward, this is right, and this is left. Great. So this visual actually help us to understand our animations better. And now if we try to move diagonally, then you can see that our player is not actually playing proper diagonal animations. Like at some time it just breaks the animation, like the player is trying to move in this direction, but the animations also like trying to speak like the player is moving in this direction, but it's actually moving in diagonal. And for the left diagonal, you can see complete animations starts to break down. So to fix this, uh, what we need to do is like we can just select any of the animations, or let's see how long our any of the animation is. So let's say we select the animation player. Let's see, for the animation walk forward, the complete animation length is 1.23. So we need to make all these animations of same length. So let's open up our blend space 2D, select the forward animation, and we no need to tweak this forward animation, but we need to select the right animation. Then click on custom, use custom timeline, and the timeline length is 1.23. The loop mode to be linear. The start offset, make it as 0, that's by default, and also make sure you select this stretch time scale. We will be doing the same thing for the left animation as well. So let's make the time length as 1.23, loop mode to be linear. Also for the backward animation, we will do the same thing. So once you have finished using this custom timeline, now also make sure you turn on this sync option. I will be explaining what this sync actually does, but before that, let's start transitioning from inactive to active by clicking on this triangle. So if you select the triangle on this inactive, it switches to this inactive state. If you click on the triangle of active, it sets to active state. Let's see now. If we move our arrow at this diagonal, you can see that our animation starts to play properly. And if we move at this diagonal, you can see that the animation is playing properly. Great. Now the same thing goes for this lower diagonal as well as this diagonal, and yes, this looks so much better from what we had previously. So now let's see why we actually used custom timeline length for all these animations. And the reason is because we need to play all the animations in same phase. For an example, that when we try to play the animation here, if it doesn't have this custom timeline length, then maybe the forward animation leg tries to put the right leg from back to front, and this right animation maybe tries to put the leg from right to back, and this actually creates the glitch that we saw previously. So to avoid the glitch, to have both consistency of the leg movement, we use the same timeline length. And now let's see what's actually the use of this sync. So the sync actually helps all the animations to be in a synchronous way. So let's say that when you are at this point, maybe let's just assume that the complete animation length is of 2 seconds, and when you are at this point, the forward animation plays for 1 second, and suddenly you switches from here to here. Then the right animation actually starts to play from 1 second to 2 seconds rather than going from 0 to 1. So you just, let's say you go from 0 to 1 on this, and then suddenly you go from 1 to 2 on this. So this actually makes the synchronize of animations properly. For more understanding, you can google out what sync keyword does, and you will have a better knowledge. Great. Now let's go back to the root. So now let's start adding some other states as well. So let's go to the root path, and we will add a state from inactive to inactive fall, and we'll add a same to our active state. So these both states will be inactive fall, and the second state will be active fall. And you may have a question, and that basically says like, hey, why these both are state machines while these both states are a blend tree? And the reason for this is like, in our inactive state fall, we will basically transition from let's say in air animation, and once we hit the ground, then we will transition to land animation. And as soon as we land, we need to switch back to our inactive state. So basically the animations will be in a controlled way, so that as soon as one animation finishes, it goes to the next, and if that finishes, the cycle continues. So if we have something like that, then the state machine is really helpful. Let me just give you an example what exactly I mean. So let's go to fall, it's not fall to roll actually. Let's delete this, and let's add the animation of floating, and then fall to roll, and then we switch to end. Great. Now if we try to play this, then nothing happens, and that's because all these transitions are set to auto. That basically means that as soon as our inactive fall state starts, it switches to this animation, then this transition is auto, so it suddenly switches to our next animation. Even this transition is auto, so it goes to end. So once it reaches end, there is no other animations to play, and even it cannot go back to inactive state because there is no transition. So that's why it's playing T-pose. So let's fix that up. So now we want the floating state to play the animation again and again till the player reaches ground. And as soon as the player reaches ground, we need to trigger this fall to roll animation, and then we quit the state. So to do that, in the transition, let's select the transition, and here in the advanced mode, we will change it to enable, and once we finish the complete animation, then we will try to end this state. So in that case, we will select this transition, and in the switch mode, we will select at end, so that once this animation is finished, then it goes to end. So now let's try it out, and as soon as we go to this state, the floating animation plays, and even we need to set this animation as looping. And once, let's say that we reaches the ground, we will trigger this animation using code. So once we trigger this animation, it plays the end, and it also needs to go back to our inactive state. And as soon as we connect both of these states, you can see our player starts to look a kind of glitch, and that's because these both states are switching at very fast rate. So we need to have some conditions. So select this inactive fall to active transition, and then change the mode at end. Also, we will trigger this inactive fall only when we have some condition true in our code, and that's basically when the player will be in air. At that time, we will trigger this inactive fall, and once the player reaches ground, then we will trigger this condition, so that there is a proper transition. And let's see how it works. Very well. Great. Let's also add some fade in time. So what does now this fading time mean? That's basically, our player doesn't switch from this animation to the fall animation. So basically, whenever I try to run these animations, you'll see that the player hand will suddenly move from here to the animation hand, like it suddenly, changes like that. So to avoid that, we will have some transition. And if we trigger now, you can see that the player hand switches its position in 0.1. Maybe let's try it as 0.2, and you can see that no other state is gonna play until this animation finishes. That's pretty good. This looks fantastic. We'll do the same thing for our active fall. So let's open it up, and let's select the connect nodes. We will connect it to animation of maybe follow loop. Then it will go to land to idle, and then it goes to end. Let's also change these transitions. Even we need to set this animation to be looping, and then once we reach the ground we play the fall land animation. Let's also set the fade in time for this transition. We will do the same thing for our idle fall. Great. Now before going further, you may say that the animation structure looks very easy to make, but honestly it is not. Even though everything till now was easy, but sometimes as we grow the things becomes very harder and it's very difficult to create the structure. Even this was the basic, but I have made some graphs that are more complicated than this. And whenever I need some requirements or whenever I try to implement some features, then the graphs doesn't meet up on my requirements, and I constantly change the graphs based on my requirements. So if ever you try to make some other controller, then don't worry, no one is gonna make any graph at once. You always need to, or you may need to change the graph depending on what actually you need. For this series, I think this graph will fit our requirement, but if we try to add some other features, then yes, the graph may break during that time. Well, that's apart. Now, I think we just made a mistake, and that's basically these animations, are not, equipped of bow. So the animation should be walk, not aim walk forward. So let's quickly change them as the forward animation to be standing walk forward, the right animation instead of aim walk right, let's make it standing walk right. We'll do the same thing for the back, and at last the left one. Great. Now let's try to play this, and I just forgot we also need to change this idle animation, so let's change it as standing idle, and that's great. Let's also see if the diagonal movement are properly working, and I think it's working, but we need to set them as looping. Great. Now let's save our scene and let's open the GLB file. Let's start looping all the animations that we need. So the first animation was the floating, the next was fall a loop, and then we had this walk right, walk left, walk forward, walk back, and yeah, that's it. So now let's click on re-import. Okay, everything is done. Let's check. So let's now see the diagonals, and nope, these are not perfect. So I think that's because we just changed the animations. So this duration was the animation of the forward, and we actually changed that. So that's the reason these animations are not exactly matching the diagonals. So either you can change the custom length of this animation too, or you can just get the length of this animation, and then you can set the length of all the other animations based on this. But I'm just lazy to do that, so let's just change them as time length to be 1.23, same as other, and also the loop mode to be linear. Now you can see it's working more properly than what it was previous. Great. Now let's also add a intermediate animation, that we had of equipping bow. So basically now the player just moves, and when we click on the active state, it suddenly switches to the active state. So we need one more animation that's gonna fill the gap between this state. So let's drag and drop from the inactive state, and let's add animation of equip bow and connect it to the active. Also the transition is not going to be auto, it will be enabled, and the second transition will be auto, but the switch mode will be at end, so that as soon as we equip our bow, then it goes to the active state. Alright, now let's try. Great, let's also add some fade timing curve, and we'll do the same thing for the reverse option. So we go from active to inactive state, and during that time we'll do the switch mode to be end and the advanced mode to be enabled. Now when we go from the active to inactive, you'll see that the animation is played in reverse. We need the animation to be played from equip bow to de-equip bow. So you can see, but the animation is playing in reverse. That's basically from unarmed to active state. So to solve that issue, we'll be using the play mode forward or backward. So if we try to set it as backward, then the animation is played in reverse. So you can see that. So we'll use this option in our GD script to set like which direction we want to move. That's great. Now let's quickly rename some of our nodes. So let's rename this animation node to de-equip bow or equip bow. It depends on you, but let's just rename it as de-equip bow. And inactive fall, let's rename this in-air animation to fall, and the fall to roll animation as fall to land. Great. Make sure you just name similar to me, because we'll be using them in code in later on series. So if you rename them improper, or if there is any mistake in naming them, then just make sure you don't do that. Else, yes, the game may crash or you'll get an error. So we'll name the same nodes in our active fall. So the first node was fall and the second one was fall to land. Great. Now let's start editing the active state. So basically in active state we don't have the animation of drawing our arrow or dodging the attacks. So let's do that. So now let's just disconnect this one, and let's add a one shot node that's connected to the output, and then let's add a state machine that's connected to the shot, and let's open up the state machine. And the first animation we will use is draw arrow, and the animation is here, draw arrow. Then once we draw the arrow, we will go to release arrow as soon as we press or as soon as we release our mouse button. So let's select standing aim recoil, and then we will switch at end. Great. Let's change the transitions. So switch mode is at end also. The mode is not going to be auto, so it's going to be enabled. That means that this animation is going to play, but we will have the control on this animation that when we want to play it. So we will be playing this release animation once we release our mouse button, and if you don't release our mouse button, this animation is not going to play. And for this last transition, we'll only transition to the end node if the release animation is finished. That's great. Let's start now. And yes, this animation starts to play, and then as soon as we release the mouse button, we will trigger this event that will release the arrow, and once that's released, again the output goes to this blend space 2D. That's perfect. Also, let's try to move forward, and now let's try to fire the arrow, and this time you will see that the player is actually moving forward, but as soon as we fire the arrow, the player stands in his own position, and we don't want that. We want that our player can easily move in any direction, and he can fire his arrow without having concern of his movement. So now to do that, we have a edit filters option in our one shot node, and let's click on the edit filters. And in this edit filters, what we want is, like, we'll select this Mixamo rig spine, we will click on enable filtering, and also we will select the field selected children, so that we no need to manually select all the children of this bone. So basically these bones are all the bones that we had in our rig. So that's basically this. And then let's select field selected children, click on OK. Now what does this edit filters do? Basically it uses these animations and it stack upon this node. So basically we just target the upper body bones using this edit filters. We just target the upper body bones by selecting only the bones, and this animation plays, and the lower body animation will be this movement animation. And yeah, that's great. So next, let's see if we release our arrow, it goes back to the movement, but here again there is slight variation, and to fix that we'll just use the fade in and fade out time. So let's change it to 0.1. I think 0.2 is good, and for the fade out time let it be 0.2. So now let's check. Yes, there is a smooth transition, and even the release there is smooth transition. That's fantastic. Next, let's add the graph for dodging attacks from the enemy or from any object. So to add that, we will again add one more one shot that's connected to this one. And again one more question arises, hey, why we need to add one shot between this and this? Why can't we add one shot some way over here? And the question is valid. So the answer for that is, I personally want this one shot that basically says that drawing the arrow to be at the top priority. So that's why I change the position of this one shot that's near to the output, and the dodging priority is lesser than this. So that's why I'll be setting it between or after this node, and the last priority is the movement. Yes, this is how the graph will work. And also, as I said, that it took me months to actually figure out how exactly to set up all the nodes. And now let's add one more state machine. This will help us to play the dodge animations. So let's connect the state machine output to this one shot, and let's open it in editor. Let's quickly connect from the start node to add animation of maybe dodge forward, or you can select dive forward. So let's do forward, or I think it's better to use dive forward. That's connected to the end. We'll do the same thing for all our other dodge animations. So let's select the dodge forward, connect it to end, and then dodge left, connect it to end. Then the last one is dodge right, connected to end. Now this graph looks different from what we made earlier, and what we will do is, like, as soon as we try to dodge, we will trigger any of these transitions. So maybe if the player is pressing the left button and he tries to dodge, we will set the path as maybe dodge left, and then it goes to end. Or if the player presses a right button, I mean the right movement, and when he tries to dodge the attack, then we will set the path to this dodge right. Great, we'll do the same thing for our forward or backward. And I just made a mistake, so let's quickly change this animation to dodge backward, and let's change this auto to enabled, so that we can have more control using GD script. That's fine. And also we will change these transitions only to transition from this point to the end node once our animation is finished. And also a quick note that you can do it from here, but I feel that doing it manually gives me more control. We are not changing the advanced mode to anything because as soon as we finish the animation we want to transition to end, and rather than having a manual control over here, we will have the manual control at this point. Great. Now let's try to dodge a attack, and it goes to T-pose, no issues because we didn't select which dodge animation we want to play. So let's try dive forward, and yes, it's working perfect. Let's also change the fade in time because I felt that there is some slight sudden change in animations, so let's quickly fix it by changing the fade in and fade out time. Now it's time to rename our nodes, so let's rename this one shot node to dodge os. Let's rename this to aim os. Os basically stands for one shot, and this state machine to aim state machine, and this dodge to dodge state machine. Great. Most of our graph is finished, and there is a last point that I just need to mention. That's basically getting hit from enemies. So basically we didn't add that animation, so we will use that animation between this dodge and this one shot. So this one shot will help us to play either the dodge animation or it will help us to play the react animation. So for that we will add a transition node. You cannot just drag and drop and then add the transition node, you need to manually add it. Then let's connect the transition output to this one shot input, and now you'll see that there is no option to connect to these transitions, and that's because we need to set up our transition node. So select the transition node in the input, click on add elements, and we will add two elements. So the first one will be dodge and the second name will be react. So let's connect the dodge to dodge, and let's add a animation, connect it to our react, and let's select the animation. Maybe you can select react small headshot of friend, anything is fine. Now let's try to fire this, and you can see that nothing works. That's because we need to set the initial value, either it can be react or it can be dodge. So let's select react. Now let's try to fire. Great. I think we need to select the headshot because this animation is perfect to play the react animation. That's everything for the setup. And let's also rename the transition to dodge or react transition. Let's also rename all these dodge animations. So what was this name? It was dodge front, this is dodge back, this one dodge left, and the last one is dodge right. Like previously the name of this was dodge front, but we just changed the animation, so the name didn't change on this node. Great. Now let's also rename these animations to draw and release. Now let's talk about our progress in this video. So in this part, we set up our player scene, then built the animation tree graph for different states, then understood the flow of nodes, how each nodes work, of our state machine inside our animation tree, then implemented some basic state machine behavior. Before we wrap up, if you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to hit like, drop a comment, and also subscribe for more future content. And if you'd like to go with an extra mile in supporting me, then you can just grab the potato card membership on my itch.io for just 1 USD. Every bit of this support really helps me for keep me creating more stuff and improving for you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.